Welcome to The Other Side, Mississippi Today's political podcast. I'm Jeff Pender, joined here today with my colleague, Taylor Vance. Taylor, how are you?
Good, Jeff. How are you?
Good, doing well. We have as a guest today someone who I believe has been on this show before. We have Senator Daniel Sparks, represents District 5, I believe, Itawamba, Prentiss, and Tishomingo counties. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That's right.
He is chairman of Economics and Workforce Development Committee in the Senate. Generally part of the leadership team there as well. And we appreciate you coming on with us today.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. Look forward to visiting with you. We're obviously happy to be home for at least a little bit of time before we go back and kind of finish up the budget this year.
Yeah, Senator, I don't. If our listeners would watch the online portion of this, if they'll look at the recording on our website, they'll see it looks like you are you have a very nice setting in your background. Are you at home in Belmont?
I am. I'm actually sitting on the front porch. I figured since I wasn't in Jackson today and we would chat, I could just sit outside and enjoy the beautiful May weather.
Well, yeah, your yard back there looks like a postcard. That the Chamber of Commerce needs a shot of that.
Whenever the governor calls a special session, it may be hard to pull you away from there to put you back into the Capitol.
I'll tell you, it's good to be home. I enjoy the work, but now there's no place like home. I think Dorothy said that years ago, so I'll agree with her.
Yeah. Well, you hit on kind of the big topic, political topic this summer. Y'all have to come back and finish a budget. Well, the big question has been when. What's the latest you've heard about where things stand?
I think the budgets are pretty much mostly agreed to. I think you're going to see level funding with an increase for the half point for PERS that will be going to effect next year and some adjustment on insurance. That was pretty baseline and basic. And so I think they're in agreement on most of what we would consider the general budgets to run and function and operate government. So I know that there's been discussion that, when everybody's kind of on the same page, I'll let the governor know and he'll call us in because we don't want to go down and spend any more time than we have to. But I think that, the basic budgets are probably in agreement. There may be some other things that seem to be the matters of, I don't want to say impasse because ultimately you've got to pass. You've got to get this done before June 30. But there's been some discussion on how to spend CapEx dollars. Basically how much money that you have over and above what you've appropriated in past years. And fortunately for the last few years, we have had excess and we've had a tendency to send quite a bit of money back through projects that we normally would have bonded for. So a lot of money has gone to the Mississippi Department of Transportation, Highway 7, Highway 15, Interstate 55. There's a couple of projects this year that are on MDOT's 3-year plan. That are in Madison and Rankin counties. And in the past, we would have borrowed, we would have bonded that, and we've actually written checks. The same way with the Marshall County Economic Development Program, a lot of that we wrote cash, wrote checks for it, paid cash. So we've paid down, over $1 billion, pushing toward $2 billion worth of debt in the last few years. But now things, as they're going on in Washington, we've seen $400 million of funding for the state of Mississippi that's frozen. We know there's going to be major changes to Medicaid. So, this is a year we have $1 billion in CapEx. We have $700 million in a rainy day fund, which is your savings account. That's not really something somebody needs to be trying to spend on one-time project things. That's your emergency money. And then we'll see where we land this year. If we hit our numbers, there could be another, $400 million plus in excess. So the real question I think that I've been hearing the rumblings for is, what do you do with what you have in your excess accounts?
Yeah. So do you think that there will be any spending with CapEx money this fiscal year? I think there's been some, I think, back and forth on, well, do we just, not spend any CapEx on local projects, commonly what we kind of call the Christmas tree bill, do we not touch that? But do we, spend some on like IHL, community colleges, MDOT, because those are true state assets, or do we just not spend any at all? What sort of your understanding on where the conversation is around that?
Well, I've not been in the middle of those conversations. I guess I could give you my take on it, and kind of from what I've understood. First of all, the monies for MDOT, $40 million, for instance, is an annual amount that we put in that helps us draw down federal funds. So it'd be foolish not to, put money toward that project, certainly, or that drawdown. Your IHLs and community colleges, those are annual funding amounts. And again, it used to be part of the quote bond bill. So if we're going to fund our IHL and community college institutions for their rehab and restoration and different projects around their campuses, then, we need to do that. And I think you kind of hit on a very important note. Those are clearly state assets. I mean, I do have the home campus of Northeast and ICC within my Senate district, but they don't belong to my Senate district. They belong to the state of Mississippi. So I think that's very important. Then you have the $138 million of ESSER funds, K-12 dollars, that have been clawed back. And I know that Superintendent Lance Evans is trying to work to get those funds back. And that is a situation where if we supplant that money because that's mid-construction projects or things of that magnitude, that's $138 million. So when you start chipping away at those numbers, what's $1 billion in the bank doesn't look exactly as big as it used to look. And that's without Medicaid consideration. And then the big issue is, and I think the lieutenant governor has been on record saying he wants $200 million this year, if not more, to go into PERS as we continue to look to shore up the retirement system and also get an annual stream of revenue. And then one last thing is the Senate's position, and certainly my position is since we've gone to the pathway to the elimination of the income tax, that our rainy day fund, which is currently only 10% of appropriations, about $700 million, should be plussed up to 12% of actual revenues, which would bump us to close to $1 billion. So 265, 300 million we would put over there. And I think that would put us in a more serious position about your working cash, because we only have 34 and a half days of working cash, and that's one of the lowest in the country. So as we move toward this elimination of income tax, and you're potentially reducing some of your revenues, you need to plus up your savings account. So I think that's been kind of the position on the Senate side. I mean, I have small rural municipalities. They need help with things like, roads, bridges, fire trucks, all of the things that are local government driven. And we want to do that. But we also, as a state, have to be prudent in dealing with PERS and dealing with the savings accounts of the state, because if we do not, ultimately the employer rate goes up on local counties and cities, or the costs somehow trickle down. And so if we do not do a project bill this year, a local project bill, if you will, that doesn't mean we can't do one next year. It doesn't mean you can't do two next year. It's just the level of uncertainty right now with everything going on at the federal level with DOGE and specific cuts we've already seen is probably where a lot of our conservative approach to this is.
We're seeing some other states, I think Virginia this week, after some debate or whatever, they're deciding they're gonna build up the bank account. See what happens. Now, one thing we've seen, the numbers again this month, they're starting to trend down a little bit, correct, on collections, sales tax.
Yeah, they're hitting the estimates. We're still up for the year, but we're not having this overage. And you got to bear in mind, we went from 5 to 4.7, from 4.7 to 4.4 on the state income tax, and next year we'll go from 4.4 to 4. That's already in law. And then in addition to that, we'll cut $127 million from the grocery tax, and we're making cities and counties whole with any of their diversions. So That stuff has to be factored into what our budget looks like going forward. And I think, as a general rule, as a conservative, I always think we should try to run leaner. We should try to be more efficient. And that's whether you have a bunch of money in the bank or that you don't. But, with all the press down of federal funds the last 5 or 6 years, it's a different environment going forward because, we have a tremendous amount of debt at the federal level. They literally cannot continue to do what they're doing. And states like Mississippi have better be prepared because we're one of the net receivers of a lot of the federal money that comes down.
One thing you mentioned a minute ago, as far as budget talks, what you've heard, I think we've heard similar. Most agencies going to be kept relatively flat, except for maybe some extra insurance cost and retirement fund. Pretty much, but nobody's seeing huge increases in agency budgets.
I don't think so. And again, each agency comes in and makes their pitch if there's something unique. And you got to remember what we inherited 6 years ago. We had CPS and federal receivership. We had corrections on the cusp of federal receivership. A lot of these budgets have been plussed up in the last 5 or 6 years. So if they're at level funding or something along the lines of level funding, that's still quite a bit more than they were being funded a few years ago. So I think that's an area of focus. And, CPS, we're still trying to make sure that we get that situation in a more efficient processing manner, and that requires more attorneys. And if you can process people through the court system, you're not having to house them in a hotel with a staff member and just those are unfortunate situations that anytime a child comes into the custody of the state. But when they do, we need to do a better job of turning that process around.
Well, you mentioned something I know you've worked on a great deal last few years, the public employee retirement system. This session earlier this year, some major changes done there that you were the key architect of. When you're coming back to set a budget, what else is there to be done on PERS right now?
Well, my opinion on PERS, and has been from day one, is that we have to have reform, which we did with Tier 5 for future employees. The first rule is we have to protect the people who have already made their commitment to the state. That's current employees and retirees, and they're going to be paid everything they're due and everything they're owed, and we're not going to change the rules of the game after they've already done their part. So the legislation we did this year with PERS reform did just that. We created a future tier for future employees. We are putting more money into the system to ensure the benefits to the current employees. We're $26.5 billion underfunded. And there's, the PERS website does a great job of putting all this information out there. But historically, starting in 1985 through 1999, the legislature, and again, I repeat, the legislature, not employees, not retirees, the legislature voted benefits to retirees and employees, but they didn't bill them for it. They didn't put money aside for it. So they gave 13% in raises between 85 and 89. They raised the service credits from 1 5/8 per year to 2% over time, and again, did it retroactively. And then in 1990, they started an ORP program for IHL employees, an optional program that was not well thought out as far as being tied to the PERS employer rates. And then in 99, they passed the COLA legislation that gave 3% guaranteed compounded cost of living adjustment. And all of those things are benefits that employees that are in the system today have earned and they have the rights to. But the legislature from 85 to 99, you talk about a Christmas tree, they handed out Christmas gifts. The problem is that they didn't even put it on layaway. They just said, we'll send the bill to the legislature of 2025.
One thing I should say, this week, I think, heard a little bit, some first responders, law enforcement, maybe the Chiefs of Police Association, expressing some concerns about the Tier 5, the changes that down the road they might hurt recruitment of new employees. I guess some of the concern has been with law enforcement and perhaps teachers. What's your response to that?
Well, I think anytime there's change, people are concerned, and they're also going to say, we already have a hard time hiring in law enforcement, in the first responder world. And, a lot of that's not due to benefits. It's due to, unfortunately, the way society has moved in a direction away from respecting authority and just the general difficulties as far as addressing our our societal ills, if you will. A lot of the things we deal with in government, we're not dealing with the problem, we're dealing with the symptoms of the problem. But in the sense of the years to retirement, I think that was their biggest issue. I met with and spoke with the association head for the firefighters, both professional and volunteer. I have spoken to people on the police chiefs association groups. I'm supposed to speak, I believe, Commissioner Tyndall's public safety summit later this month. We're listening and we're trying to say, hey, is there something that we can craft, something that we can do? And of course, one of the things with Tier 5, I want to sit down with people. I sat down with 2 fire chiefs and 1 mayor last week, and we had some great conversations about reservations they may have about Tier 5, some ideas they had about the retirement system. So I think you'll continue to see the next year or two that we find some ways to maybe make it even better. And I've said from day one, Tier 5 is a framework. The PERS board voted to endorse the framework of Tier 5 with an 8-1 vote. And when I say framework, that means we're going to bolt some stuff onto it as the years go by. We're going to pay for it. We're going to be able to afford it. And we're not going to mortgage the future of other people so that I can get an attaboy today. Because I remind you, in 1999, when a lot of this legislation was done, particularly the COLA, that was an election year. So, it'd be real nice in an election year if I could go out and tell a large swath of Mississippians, here, I have given you something, remember me when it comes time to vote. I just, I have a trouble with that. But, 25 years later, we're having to pay the bill. So, but that's what we inherited. It was $20 billion deficit when I got elected, and, changes from the actuaries and changes from the PERS board drove it up to $26.5 billion. No one has mismanaged the funds. We just simply gave benefits and the state didn't pay for it. It's the fault of the legislature.
One thing I think you've made clear this year as y'all were discussing and looking at the changes that were adopted, one thing I think you made clear is this doesn't mean we're not going to have to put some more money in on the short term. What's that going to look like for this coming budget?
I appreciate that question. As you know, the PERS board wanted to raise the rate to 22.4%, and they voted to do that, I think, in 23, and then they drew that back, and then in 24, they came back with it again over a 3-year implementation. And our cities and counties, and I'll tell you, a lot of our superintendents at K-12, they said, we can't do this. In other words, we're going to start a death spiral. If you make labor so expensive, they're going to try to start contracting things out. Well, when we looked at PERS, to me, it was to look at it from a holistic standpoint. What needs to happen across the board to try to make this system more solvent and sustainable? And so the first thing, like I said, we did a Tier 5 for future employees. We secured the benefit of current employees. And the Tier 5 will deliver its 1.89%. This is from the actuaries of total payroll, additional funds to go pay this unfunded actuarial liability. That will be hundreds of millions of dollars as Tier 5 people come into the system. You think, well, 1.89% doesn't sound like a lot. Well, today's payroll is $7.2 billion, and 1.89% of that would be about $143 million. So you'll see that as a sliding scale as Tier 5 employees come in. From the standpoint of the PERS reforms to ORP, and I think maybe sent you the letter from Kavanaugh McDonald on that. That is going to generate, it says $19 million this year. I submit to you about $7.5 million of that is new money. And then that grows $3 to $5 million every year. That is significant funds that will go to $105 million by 2055. And I think I sent the chart to you that has the numbers out there. That's, 20 something million dollars in the next couple of years, then 30, then 40, then 50. 10 years out, we're looking at, $50 million just from the ORP reforms. That's without raising anyone's taxes. That's without taking any money away from roads and bridges or education, like the $100 million did from the lottery and HB1 when we started. 80 of that came from MDOT. So that's why the gas tax in the House bill was higher. 20 of that came from the Educational Enhancement Fund, which I don't think we need to take that away from them. So we're going to generate, and it seems like the House has set a baseline of $100 million. We're going to generate $100 million or more. But the issue is that we need to make sure that we have a sustainable source of revenue. I would like to see $200 to $300 million this year, just as an infusion, especially as we kind of work through to see this ORP money coming in, the Tier 5 benefits coming in. But one of the things I'd like to do, and I talked about plussing up the rainy day fund by $265 to $300 million, I want that money set aside. And the growth off of that could go toward PERS. That should be, you would think, $12 to $15 million a year if you're making 5%. Those are the things that we're going to cobble together. I'd love to see us get around 125, 135 a year. And the other thing on the increase, this will be the second year of the half point increases to get us to 19.9. So some of the groups are out there saying, well, the actuaries say they need 600 million. We appreciate 100 million, but that's not enough. The 2% more that we're adding is another 150 million. And if we can come up with an additional 125, 130 million, that's getting us close to that $300 million a year range. There is also discussion, I think the Lieutenant Governor has floated this, and again, I don't know how to be received at the House. I think he's asked them for 200 to 300 million this year. I'm quite confident he's asked for that. He's also given them 2 or 3 funding options, one of which is to take the 2% set aside and take half of that, which would be $78 million, and put toward PERS. If you take that $78 million and you couple it with ORP, there's your $100 million already, and it's growing. That's the thing. I don't want to give you $100 million and just say that's it. I want it to continue to grow, because when we get this PERS unfunded liability under control, I hope I live long enough to see a day that the rates actually come down on both employer and employee. And that, again, we go back to that framework and we bolt on a COLA, an old age COLA, I think Senator Bryan has mentioned from time to time. So I think that we have that opportunity to do that. But as a conservative, I can't give you something today and promise to pay for it tomorrow and pretend that's conservative, because that's what got us in this mess.
You mentioned ORP a couple of times. That's one of those things I guess until recent months even, I knew a little bit about it, but I guess I didn't understand all the details. Can you give a quick sketch of what ORP was and
Yes.
perhaps a change that got made to it this year?
Be proud to. ORP came along in 1990, and it was for IHL only employees. So you've got 9 different employers, our 8 institutions and University of Mississippi Medical Center. And it was meant to be for high quality faculty that may just catch them passing through. I mean, we get somebody that's going to research cancer, or we get some renowned surgeon that could come in and be with us. They're not going to be here long enough to vest in a defined benefit program. They're not going to spend, 20, 30, 35 years in the state of Mississippi. So I think that was probably a well-intended program. The problem is when it first came in, when they had the employee contribution, the state would then match them a little bit, and it went into a 401k style program. It was a pure defined contribution program. 5.53% went toward PERS. So they opted out of PERS, but the employer contribution, only a small amount went to the employee. And in 1993, they were supposed to review this, and then I think they did again in the 2000s. The problem is they reduced the 5.53 to 2.5. So the employer rate at the time was 9% or so. 2.5% of that went to pay on the PERS liability. The rest went to this ORP employee. But it stayed attached to our PERS rate all these years. So now we're at 17.4, and 14.9% of the employer portion is going into the ORP participants account, and they're putting up 9. I can't find anywhere in the country you would get a 14.9% to 9 match. And while my friends at IHL probably say, hey, I wish you'd have left this alone, it was $503 million of payroll. So that's a huge amount of money. And we had learned over the years they'd gotten a little loose with who got in ORP. Now our coaches are in it, other folks are in it, and it was a negative effect on PERS. And I'm going to be honest with you, the sharpest of the sharp in the PERS community, and I talk to them, and I mean retirees. I mean people who live it, breathe it, and know it. There were 150 of them I spoke to the other night in Prentiss County. And when I asked who knew what ORP was, 2 hands went up. So I do hope that our retirees and the people in the PERS system know and believe that when the Senate approached how we stabilize PERS, we were looking at everything. And ORP was a key piece of that. And that's why it will deliver hundreds of millions of dollars more toward the PERS unfunded actuarial liability, because we capped it at 9% for future employees, and we capped the current people where they are, not to take a benefit away from them. And I think that this will be better across the board. It continues to give IHL a tool that they believe they need. And the other thing we did that I think is important that I want to make sure your listeners are aware of, it really doesn't mean anything financially to the system because it's such a small group of people, but it was so divisive. The Supplemental Legislative Retirement Program was created in 1989. It's kind of a theme. 89 SLRP, 90 ORP, 99 COLA. All of those legislators, and by the way, go look and see how much they funded PERS, and then look and see from 2000 to 2025 how much they funded PERS. We put $110 million in last year. I don't know of any other legislative direct appropriation that we've had over this period of time, and this didn't just sneak up on folks. But that's what we have. We're going to deal with it. But the SLRP program, SLRP, is for the legislature, and I don't know why they created that in 89. I guess some folks feel like they're underpaid. I kind of find it interesting that we're paid, I think, the same amount of salary that we were paid in 89. So inflation adjusted, we're paid less than they were. But I knew what it was when I ran. I didn't run for this position because I thought it was lucrative. I ran for it because I wanted to help fix the problems of the state of Mississippi. But we end the SLRP program going forward. This legislature, the 2025 legislature, put forward legislation that ends SLRP when we go to Tier 5 in March 1st, that there will be no more SLRP going forward. Now, again, I'm not going to strip away benefits from prior legislators who are on SLRP, who voted for SLRP. And I don't know how you vote yourself a benefit. Usually you have to recuse yourself if it's something that's beneficial to you. But nonetheless, SLRP will be no more going forward. And this legislature has taken the PERS problems and tried to find solutions. And it's not easy because people are very concerned. They've built their life, their retirement around this program. I want it to be solvent. My mother is a PERS retiree, in full disclosure. She's earned everything she got. She taught 27 and a half years in the classroom. And she and everybody just like her, I intend for the state of Mississippi to pay what has been agreed to these people.
Well, Senator, really appreciate you talking with us, and I guess it sounds like sometime here soon, or at least before the end of June, we'll be seeing you back at the Capitol. In the meantime, I'm wishing I was on a hammock near that oak tree behind you in your very scenic yard there.
And Jeff, just to end on sort of a lighter note, I think it might be good to point out to some of our listeners, we've had a lot of musically inclined guests on our podcast recently. Ag Commissioner Andy Gibson,
whose album is about to come out.
He has an album, and a lot of people may not know that Senator Sparks, you used to be a gig artist in a prior life. Is that right?
I did. I grew up in a very musical family, a lot of it from church and, 4-part harmony. And I still certainly enjoy that. But my brother is very talented, guitarist, vocalist, etc. And I tell people, I'm about 10% of what he can do. But he was kind enough to teach me some of the basics, and I'm a 3-chord strum guy with a lot of fun because I remember over the years playing gigs and people say I don't want to play that, I don't want to play Brown Eyed Girl. Well, if that's what people are there to hear, I want to play it because my job, in my opinion, at that time was to help people be happy. And was to help people, get away from maybe the work life that they deal with. And, if they want to come out and listen to some music and relax. And I'm excited particularly in the country music sphere, that we have some folks that have come along in the last few years that are great artists. They're great writers, and I like storytellers. That at the end of the day, if you hang in there with us a lot of times on legislation, if we'll tell a better story, if we will actually take the time to talk to people and give them the facts and tell them why we're doing what we're doing, most people are reasonable and they'll say, well, I sure hate we've come to this point, but I do appreciate that you told me the story because now I know why you did what you did. So I love the story songs, I will have to say. And my Kenny Rogers songs, I guess you would look back on. I don't know that The Gambler, if there's ever been a better story song.
I can still play D, C, and G, so we might have to do Brown Eyed Girl sometime. Maybe
go.
the next time we have you on, we'll get a couple of guitars out.
That sounds great.
Well, thanks again for coming on, and we look forward to having you on again in the near future.
Thank you guys very much. Appreciate the opportunity.